Hello, everyone. I am Alex at Hyli, and today our guest on the Hyli podcast is Rute, who is was a grantee for Hyli. You were our second grantee ever, and you worked on proof of residency, taking Portuguese signed bills to create proof that someone lived in Portugal using SP1 and settling on Hyli. Hello, welcome.
Hello, Alex. So I'm Rute and I'm a software engineer. I studied computer science. Then I started to work in consultancy jobs for Web2. And then I got a grant from Ethereum Foundation to work on a ZK compiler. And it also happened that I also did a grant for Hylé, which was proof of residency that we are going to talk about it.
We're going to talk about proof of residency first, and then we'll expand to some larger topics. Let's start with proof of residency, though. So I give a very general overview, but do you want to tell us a bit more about how it works?
So first, because of the timeline, because it was like just for 1 month, I decided to do more like a proof of concept. But the idea is that so most of the times some entity asks you for like a utility bill or some document that can prove that you live at a certain place. And this is like a bit of a pain in the ass sometimes because sometimes, or you just live with your parents when it happened to me when I was in the university, or I don't know, you just don't know exactly where you have that stuff saved. So, and then also sometimes you just need to upload something like a bank statement where it also shows like all of your
Yeah,
money
your personal
saved in the
data.
bank.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like a great experience for someone, especially if that someone is worried about privacy. So yeah, the idea is that this is like a web application where you can upload a utility bill. In this case, it only works for Portuguese utility bills because it checks for an ATCUD code that is used for from Portuguese government to sign valid utility bills. It checks
Mhm.
for that. It also checks if you have a valid address in that PDF, and then it generates a proof. Yeah, you actually can prove that you live in this certain location. I'm also saying in a certain location and not specifying where, because the idea is also that you can also scope this. So prove that you live in a certain country, but you can also prove that you live in a certain city. Of course, for now it only works for Portugal in the whole country. But the idea is that you can easily scope which
Yeah.
is the area that you want to prove you're living.
Okay, yeah, so you can easily adapt it to say, well, it's still unsigned Portuguese bills because of this ATCUD code, but without having to create a whole new prover for other country codes, which would be very cool, but was not in the scope of your grant, obviously.
Yeah.
You could say, I need someone to live on this city code or on this street, and so on. And that's really cool because there's so many use cases for that because we can want to prove that we live in a given country. That's actually something that we have to do fairly often. Like if you're applying for an apartment, you have to prove that you already live in a country and stuff like that, which is pretty stupid, but still a requirement. But then there's so much that can be done on the municipal or on the street level or even on the building level if it's an apartment complex where you have neighbors and everything. You could have, for example, a group chat where you can enter only if you can prove that you live in the building, or if you live on the street, you can take part in conversations about the next public park or whatever. And if you live in a certain city, I don't know how it is for Portugal, but in France, you get some specific advantages at city infrastructures if you live in that city. If you live in that city, so for example, swimming pool, library, stuff like that. Is it the same for you?
Yeah, it is the same. So that's also why I think this is asked for so many purposes that is it's actually worth it to give it more privacy uh, when doing this process. And also even for KYC process, most of the times they also ask you for that. And yes, even for smaller applications like chat groups or I don't know, yeah, I think the sky is the limit, and you can imagine anything with this stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. That is so cool. Yeah. So if we go a little bit more into the implementation of it, so where did you start? How did you start building this? I remember we changed the scope a bit at the beginning of the grants because we were like, maybe we should do this instead. Wait, that can't be done because ZK is not mature enough yet. So, how did that go? How did you build that library, and what went super well from the start, and what didn't?
Yeah, so I think what I struggled the most was actually the beginning. And yeah, especially because of that, because okay, most of the times when you're implementing something with ZK, you imagine a lot of great things to do, but then the technology is still not so mature, so you have a lot of challenges to implement what you imagined before. So yeah, I would say that the beginning was the most hard part for me. And yeah, I was planning to start using ZK email also because I think it's a great technology since you can prove anything with your email and you spend like all of your life looking at emails and receiving emails from everywhere. But the thing is, for utility bills, you actually needed to parse PDFs, and this was not implemented at ZK email at the time. And there were some drawbacks mentioned for that. And also because I didn't have too much time to explore that challenge, I just decided, okay, yeah, because the PDF is the most important thing to prove that this actually works. I'm gonna just move on and just try to implement the PDF parsing in a ZKVM, which I didn't know if it was also possible. But in the end, with SP1, it was pretty easy. I just had to find a PDF parsing library for Rust that was compatible with the ZKVM.
Yeah.
So SP1 works well in a server. It doesn't work well on the browser. So there was also that challenge. And for that, what I thought about doing was like spinning up a ephemeral server
Mhm.
only for that user. And as soon as the proof was generated, the server was killed. And yeah, I did that well for the proof of concept, and it seemed to work fine. It's not the ideal process, of course. It's like the best would be like to prove everything client side,
Yeah.
but I think for a proof of concept is already pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, these are very good. And we have another grantee, and we're gonna have a blog post coming up soon about this, who worked on benchmarking ways to create browser side proofs. And yeah, ZKVMs have limits on this, let's just say. But in the meantime, having this temporary server that just fires up when you start, like when you send the PDF and just dies at the end and erases everything, is a good workaround.
Yeah.
And for these purposes, it was doing great. Even though, obviously, the more private you want to be, the more in browser you're going to be. And here it's about your personal address and name and possibly other information, because that's why you're doing this whole thing. Because on these papers, there is too much information. So
Also
it
has
makes
your
sense.
expenses, so
Yeah.
it's not, why do they need to know how much I
Yeah.
spend on electricity or whatever?
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And there's so many other reasons to do that as well. Like one thing that so in France, one thing that I've seen in the past 15 years is that when I started working, we had this whole thing about, oh, you should have your postal address on your resume, on your CV, to say that you live close to the office. And obviously now we live in present, and living next to the office isn't as important. But there's also this whole discrimination thing going on where if you live in a poor neighborhood, then people are less likely to hire you. And it's just,
Oh,
and so you're going to be paid less. So you're going to stay in the poor neighborhood. And it's just that kind of stuff is also worth not saying if you can just prove that you live near enough. So yeah, there's so many
yeah.
reasons to use it. And yeah, I remember at the beginning it was all about trying to parse it from ZK email. I remember that we also realized that the PDF wasn't necessarily attached to the email. So often they'll just send you a link to your client account, and then you download the email, so the PDF.
Yeah, sometimes you can just download the PDF and save it, and maybe you just deleted the email. So I even think that even if I had more time to implement this, even if I used DK email, which gives a better experience maybe for some users, just log in with your Google account and then you can just check your email. Even if I had that, I would still would like to have the upload way of doing it.
Yeah, that's good. Giving options is always better anyway.
Yeah.
And so your proof of concept, as you said, it's AtCut, but it's really a PDF parsing and then generating a proof. So it could be applied to many other uses, right? So either proof of residency in another country. I'm thinking of France, where we have 2D doc, which is very, very similar to ATCUD. But I'm also thinking other types of identity verification, and instead of verifying where you live, verifying other attributes. Do you want to tell me more about that?
Yeah, actually, that is something that I'm also excited about this project is that you can easily change the logic, like the core logic for this case. And because everything it was built in a modular way, you can still spin up a ephemeral server. And the only thing that you need, like, if you just want to expand for other countries, you can reuse the library and just add more logic into it. But if you want to use for another use case, you can just change the library itself and create another one similar, but doing the logic that you want for a project, and everything else works fine in the end.
Okay. So a lot of it is still reusable and can easily be, yeah, tweaked by adding lines and not necessarily rewriting.
Yeah,
That's cool.
thinking about the core logic and just implement it.
Okay.
And it's more or less like the same as SP1. Also, you just write your logic like in a simple program, and then you
Mhm.
can use it in a ZKVM, which is kind of cool.
Okay. And so on proof of residency, so this was a 1 month grant. It's a proof of concept. You made your repository public so that anyone can contribute to it. What are things that you would like to see people add to it? What are some improvements or some extensions that you'd like to see in the future on this project?
I would say that's most of the stuff that I would love to see implemented there is to improve the quality for the core library to check the PDF,
Mhm.
which I did, but just a simple case like checking the address and checking if there is a TCUD code. But you can still also connect that to the government API. You can just check if the ATCUD code is actually valid.
Okay.
by checking also the API of the government. But for that, you need to ask for a key. That's also why I didn't do that. And of course, to expand to other countries. And also, I would love to check which countries could not beneficiate from this model. And maybe they would need another model because they probably don't have signed utility bills or something like that. Yeah.
That's interesting. Like, we can expand to many countries, but there's also a lot of countries where it's just not possible, and then we have to think of interesting alternatives.
It would also be cool is even to use something like Airbnb or Booking to prove that you're out of your country, because sometimes you just uh, you need to prove that you just went out because you are not able to do blah 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 in your country or
Yeah.
something like that. So I think that would be also interesting to also add on proof of residency.
Okay. It's interesting. Like sometimes when you travel in places where you need a visa, you have to fill in for every night, you have to say where you're staying. And it's like, do they need to know which hotel you're staying? Do they not just like, is it not enough to just know you're staying somewhere
Yeah.
that is like official and you're not just gonna disappear in nature? And then you could just say, like, I have assigned official housing provider, so Airbnb, Booking, or a hotel chain or whatever, that has, yeah, that can prove that I have a reservation there and they should leave me alone.
Yeah. And I think that's a great use case as well, because even Airbnb already implemented something like that. I
Mhm.
think you can also ask for documents for visa purposes, but it could be even more generic. You could not depend on the service provider to
Yeah.
actually give you that.
Yeah, not depending on others and on service providers is always nice.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on from proof of residency specifically to a bit more conversation about signed data in general. Here we're talking about signed utility bills, and those are really useful to prove who you are, where you live, and so on. Do you see other really valuable signed data today that we should start using as much as possible, or that we could really benefit from that exists?
I think most of the most important stuff is already being started to be implemented, like ID cards, passports, more documents, like PDF documents. I didn't know about this data.
Yeah.
And when I found it, I thought, oh, okay, this is quite clever. And I think with this, you can already do a lot of stuff around at least your identity. Yeah, other than that, not having any ideas right now.
Mhm. Is there anything that you think would be nice to prove that isn't around identity, then, that maybe we don't have currently, but that we should have, or things that we kind of have right now because we have ZKTLS, we have ZK email, but it would be nice if they would just do it properly instead of us having to rely on these absolutely great workarounds.
So I think maybe like the most great case would be like electronic voting, which it has still some drawbacks. And yeah, I would say maybe like to prove more that governments that they are more, I don't know how to say that, like it's not transparent. They are working around what they say they are working, like to be compliant with everything else. Yeah.
Okay, so like holding the promises a bit more and just us knowing what they're working on at a given time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting. Just seeing more accountability on a daily basis from authorities in a country or in an international or local government. Just Yeah, seeing what they're currently doing and not just what they say they're doing. There's a lot of public data now, especially in the European Union. There's a lot of data that is open now where you can see, like, oh, this person was in office today, they weren't in office today, they voted for or against. Those are public, but we don't necessarily do a lot with that information, which is very unfortunate because the information is there and we should
Yeah.
start doing more with it. That would be good to sign and to start building applications around that. So around really, yeah, democracy and just making sure that everyone can participate and can, and that people are accountable to their electorate. Um, would be good. We've had an episode about this with Kitty from Roromo. Not just that, but that is one of their project, which is opening votes to anyone using their passport. So you can just use your passport to prove that you live somewhere, that you're allowed to vote, and then you can take part in initiatives. And what she was telling me last time, which I thought was really interesting, is that you have this sweet spot of participation, kind of, because if you never vote, then it sucks, obviously. Like, we want to be able to say what we want and what we need.
Yeah.
But what she noticed, what Raramo noticed, and what we see in literature and sociology and political science is that if we always ask people to vote about everything, they just don't care about voting anymore. And it's also not necessarily good because we keep asking them, like, do you want this street to be painted red or blue or whatever? And it's just, at one point, the only people who are left voting are the ones who just really, really, really care. So you only get the extreme positions and you don't get the giant mass of people who just don't care enough. And then when you have a very important vote, then nobody votes because they're used to ignoring the votes, basically. And there's so much that needs to be done there.
Yeah, I think especially most of the times I listen people saying, "Oh, I don't need to vote. Someone is going to vote." Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like there's a loss of faith in the governments that sometimes we reply by just not doing anything anymore, which is probably not the best like way to make
Yeah.
things better. Giving up.
Yeah. But maybe with blockchain and ZK, we can recover that faith in governments.
That would be nice. That would be nice. So we were talking before this podcast about the fact that you recently joined the ZK email team. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Would you like to talk? I think eventually we're going to have an episode with Ayush from ZK Email. Would you like to talk about ZK Email and what it brings to this entire conversation that we've just had? Like, where does it bring us? Where does it bring attested data in general and ZK?
Yeah, I think ZKMail is a great project because it opens a lot of doors like for different use cases. And especially, I think it gives people a more better user experience, even for people that doesn't really know about what is ZK and what is blockchain or whatever. Because email is known for from everyone, so I think it's much easier to say, oh, you can use your email in this way and can prove that you live
Yeah.
somewhere and you don't need to look for the utility bill. We can look for you because you can query
Mm.
the inbox and yeah, I think that's like the more general way that I think ZK email helps a lot, especially to onboard people that are not aware from technical aspects of zero knowledge.
Yeah.
And yeah, because emails are signed, you can prove a lot of stuff, even from the headers of your email. You don't need to expose all of your data. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Uh,
So there's two things, and So the one you just said, which is more around privacy and not exposing anything, everything, and the second one being really onboarding the masses without having to explain.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, just getting
Yeah,
people to
because
use
with
it.
this you can create email wallets, which is much simpler for people also to get on board and on blockchain without actually need to set up MetaMask wallet or whatever, and they need to also be aware of, oh, you need to save your seed phrase, otherwise you will lose it. Because I think this is most of the stuff that gives a lot of people afraid of doing this, because they are not, oh no, so I don't have anyone to keep my keep the things safe safe
Yeah,
for me. And yeah, so I think that's a really great use case.
it's something that I see where you're like, self custodial is great because you don't need to trust anyone. And then at the same time, it's like, yeah, but I would like to trust some, like, I want to have someone just take my hand and tell me what to do, you know? Like, I don't want to trust nobody. I need help. I want it to be easy.
Yeah,
And
I
yeah.
think that is a bit changing a bit from newer generations, but
Mhm.
I think there is still a pain point for a lot of people. I see a lot of my friends, they don't want, they think like their money on the bank is safe because someone is taking care of it.
Yeah.
But in the end, it really safe? Uh, it builds like a faith, sense of trust
Yeah.
for them, and they feel safe with it. Instead of, okay, I I'm the owner of this, but if I lose the access, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
And this is a bit more scary to people. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's nobody you can call to say, hey, I did something wrong. Sorry. Can we roll it back? Like, when it's done, it's done. This is blockchain, baby.
Yeah, you need to have more accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad as long as we actually teach people and
Yeah,
help
that's
them
true.
on board. Cool. Thank you very much. I think we're getting
Okay.
closer to the end of our conversation today. So I wanted to ask you, is there anything you'd like to share today? So it can be news about yourself, it can be your next project or your dream project that you're never going to do, it can be a cause you care about, it can be general philosophical thoughts, just anything that comes to mind that you would like us and like all the listeners to remember at the end of this podcast.
Yeah, so what I would like to share is, I think, is probably most of the things that I already shared during all of these episodes. And one of them is actually, if someone cares also about this project, proof of residency, also feel free to take the project and also to expand it more, because I think that there are a lot of great use cases for this. From my side, I'm also probably taking a bit more some time when I have the time to also expand it more. But I would love to see more people from all of the community to also help and give more ideas and all of that stuff.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll put the link to the GitHub link in the description of the video, obviously, if
Yeah,
anyone wants to
cool.
check it out and contribute. And thank you very much for taking the time and for this interview.
Thank you,
See you
Alex.
soon. Bye.
See you. Bye bye.